That's good. That's a good idea. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Wiggum, Vice Chair John, Ranking Member Kelly, members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify in support of, well, now substitute House Bill 90, a measure that is designed to ensure a proper balance of accountability in the face of a public health emergency. I am here today representing Health Freedom Ohio, an Ohio-based nonprofit who is committed to raising awareness about health choices and works to preserve the fundamental human right to health freedom. I also speak for the Center for Christian Virtue, whose mission includes efforts to ensure that our representative form of government operates with transparency and is accountable to the people. We applaud the chairman, his co-lead sponsor, Representative Jay Edwards, and their 25 co-sponsors for bringing House Bill 90 forward. As we have witnessed through the last 11 months, there's a pressing need to clarify and draw constitutional boundaries around the statutes relating to public health states of emergency. Substitute House Bill 90 does draw such clear lines by first removing the ultimate authority, by striking that one word, from the executive branch currently found under ORC 3701.13, and then tempering that remaining authority with reasonable accountability measures, which involve the review and approval of the elected representatives of the people of Ohio, both through the Joint Ohio Health Oversight and Advisory Committee and through the option of both chambers adopting resolutions regarding the extent and duration of any orders under those powers. Additionally, this reasonable proposal sets forth clear language to further refine to whom the quarantine and isolation powers of the Department of Health actually apply, rather than the previously experienced blanket lockdowns, designations of essential and non-essential businesses, or current patchwork color coding systems used to restrict entire counties or regions or certain business types. The substitute bill before you today is forward-thinking. It's setting legitimate safeguards for the people of Ohio should other agencies, boards, or commissions, or other state actors be utilized to carry out similar public health emergency orders. As we are now operating within this pandemic mode more under the special duties provision in ORC 3701.14, as the previous witness, Mr. Thompson, testified to, we would hope that this panel would add this particular section under the oversight that the Legislative Committee or full Assembly will exercise. And from what I understand of the sub-bill, it does do that, so thank you. Nowhere in this bill does it prohibit either the governor or the Department of Health from actually acting in order to address an emerging public health crisis. But it will engage the legislature in a significant way. Other provisions of the bill to ensure that there is open communication between the executive and the legislature during the crisis on a daily basis are necessary to maintain both transparency and the appropriate accountability of the people of Ohio expect from our elected officials. Substitute House Bill 90 is a reasonable means of maintaining the delicate balance between the need to address real health crises when they arise and the inalienable freedoms of the people of this state to live, move, and do business. We ask that this panel would favorably report this measure at your earliest opportunity, and I would be happy to take any questions from the committee.
Thank you for your testimony. Do we have questions from the committee today? Representative Fowler, Arthur.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Sheets. You mentioned something that I think has been hit on in other testimonies around whether or not the governor still has the authority to act. And you mentioned that it wouldn't restrict his ability to act in a crisis. Could you elaborate on that a little bit more based on your understanding of the bill?
Well, it's fairly clear in one sense, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, Representative Arthur, it's very clear that we're not removing ORC 3701.13 from the law at all. So the Department of Health still has the authority to act in the event of a health crisis or a pandemic emergency. The only thing that's getting stricken in that section is that word ultimate, which we have seen has been utilized by this administration and this health department to justify extra executive actions that encroach upon the legislative power of this body. They still have the authority to act, and act in a way that they find the most judicious and the most necessary to address any kind of a major health emergency that's coming at the state of Ohio, but to do so in a way that, A, they have to actually be in communication with the elected representatives of the people of Ohio while they're engaging this, and as the bill structures out, after a number of days, the legislature has the ability to look at what they're doing and bring those officials in to testify and to present the data as to what they think needs to be done. And you make the decision as the elected people, the representatives of the people of Ohio, to decide whether or not to extend and continue such an emergency order or to make it cease. And so, again, it all starts with the governor and the Department of Health still having the ability, in the event of an emergency or an emerging health crisis, to act, and act in a way that allows them to serve the people of Ohio and protect their interests and their health. But it also engages you to protect the rest of the interests of the people of the state of Ohio, including their ability to move and work and to have businesses and to stay open and to determine for themselves individually their own best advice of what type of medical interventions they might choose for themselves. Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that response. The other side of that coin that we've been hearing some concern around is the timeliness. Do you see anything in the bill language that could impact the timeliness of the governor being able to respond to an emergency or impeding the ability to extend the emergency if it was warranted?
Chairman Wiggum, Representative Arthur, on the front end of your question, no, there's absolutely nothing, because there's no precursor where the governor has to come to the legislature to ask for the ability to start acting. That's still preserved in 3701.13 and in other places in the code, where the executive can act upon the presentation of that health crisis. What it does do on the other end of that is to say that, those orders after a certain number of days are subject to review by the elected representatives of the people of Ohio. And it's their decision to make whether or not, and in consultation with that governor, with that health director, with those public health officials, and with the business owners and the citizens of the state of Ohio, as to whether or not we need to continue on, change course, or that we're past the emergency portion of whatever emerging health crisis we might have. What we're seeing right now is, again, and people are somewhat making a joke of it, some people are talking about having a 1-year anniversary celebration of the 2 weeks to flatten the curve. I don't think any of us expected that when the governor came out last March and said that we're going to have to do these measures because we have this emerging health issue, and it's going to take us 2 weeks to flatten that curve in order to protect the citizens of the state of Ohio. If that would have been known up front, I think this legislature would have acted much more quickly.
Thank you. Representative Kelly.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Sheets, for coming in. I just want to follow up on one of the things that you just said about this bill giving us the ability of, to bring in people to testify and to talk about the decisions that we made. Are you aware of anything that precludes us from doing that now?
Chairman Wiggum, Representative Kelly, no, except for the fact of potentially an administration or executive that refuses to come in or refuses to talk with the leaders of these two chambers in relation to what's going on a daily basis. I think that we need to have more information and more transparency, and that if the administration and the Department of Health have information, they should be sharing it with the elected officials of the state of Ohio so that you can be more well-informed to be able to go back to your local districts and help people to understand what's really going on, rather than to have to guess about it because they either can't see the data or the data is confusing.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I appreciate that perspective. I'm just wondering, maybe my experience is different than other folks, but I'm just wondering if you are aware of, elected members of this body who have requested information or requested meetings or gone to these folks and asked for things that they've been refused, or, maybe they're not in a format that somebody wants, but I think we've heard a lot from folks about nobody's coming in, nobody's telling us anything, but I think sometimes nobody also asks. And so I think that creates problems too. So I guess some of my concern is just about, making a pretty sweeping policy change when we may already have the ability to do some of the things that you're talking about being able to do, having people come in, talk about why they're making these decisions, who's in the room, et cetera.
Okay. Chairman Wiggum, Representative Kelly, I appreciate your comment on that. I appreciate your thought on that. I would say that probably the reason why that the language is in the bill the way it is because you have a number of members who may have gone down that road already and felt that they did not receive a proper response or any response at all. And it's just good government if we're going to have a branch of government who can have this much effect and control over the day-to-day lives of the people of Ohio because of issuing an emergency order, that they should be talking to the elected officials of the state of Ohio on a daily basis during that emergency. We need to have that kind of communication so that we can make the right decisions for the people of Ohio. Safety is in a multitude of counselors, not in just a small hand-picked health panel.
Yeah. Do you think, my question would be, do you think that putting in a law that then allows us to have checks and balances on the executive branch, the administrative branch, not necessarily, orders that are coming out of the governor's department heads. So putting a law that then allows us to have that check with a simple majority concurrent resolution instead of every single time seeing if we can override a veto. I mean, the question is, I think here is, should this chamber have to put in a law for every single order that is made by a department head? Or do you think that it would be better to have a law that allows us, that gives us the ability then to come back with concurrent resolution? Which one would be better, maybe serve the people in a more timely manner in these situations?
Well, thank you, Chairman Wiggum, for that question. I think it's fairly clear that probably the best thing to serve the people of the state of Ohio is to have clear lines of communication and have an ability to act quickly and to act decisively. And the governor seems to be exercising that, but doesn't seem to want to have the legislature to have that same type of joint authority in relation to this issue. Now, hopefully, since I haven't heard specifically if the governor's already threatened to veto on this particular bill like he did on 311 or not, hopefully maybe the governor's office will be more amenable to this type of an idea, which is basically just saying, let's make sure we have communication, and let's make sure that we are all in agreement that we really need to move in these directions. And if that means we have to have a lockdown or we have to have X, Y, and Z, if the majority of the elected officials of the state of Ohio believe that that's the best course of action to take in consultation with others, then perhaps that's the best course of action we should be taking. But if they don't agree with that, or they believe that perhaps we've gone too far and the consequences of the protection are worse than the actual consequences of the pandemic, then you need to have the ability to be able to decide that.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony this evening.
Thank you.